Hello and welcome. My name is Steph Graham, and thank you for joining my From Public Service to Private Sector, a Roadmap for Career Transition webinar. Today, before we get started, I just want to acknowledge everyone who has joined or is watching this video. You are not alone. Right now, there is so much going on, and I know that people are feeling confused, shocked, they don't know where to turn, and they don't know what to do. I want to assure you that your experience is valuable. There is so much value in what you've done in your career, and you can make that transition. Today, I want you to walk away, if nothing else, with the understanding that it is possible. I want to give you an actionable step that you can take today to put you on the path closer to getting that job in the private sector. A little about myself before we dive in and what makes me uniquely qualified to give this presentation. My career development background is rooted in recruiting, interviewing, and corporate finance at both Uber and Pepsi. But prior to earning my MBA, I worked in political affairs. So I worked for the FDIC and also American Psychological Association and the Mortgage Bankers Association. So I have worked directly for the federal government and also liaison between associations and the government. So my expertise spans hiring, candidate evaluation, job search, and interview strategy. I work not just one-on-one with clients, but I also work with organizations, helping them with things like their candidate evaluation process, internal development, and also making sure that as they hire, it aligns with their values. I also specialize in supporting underrepresented groups, so folks who are neurodivergent, LGBTQ, racial or cultural minorities. I really take a holistic approach to my coaching. We all have so many identities that we hold, and we bring all of that to work. We spend the majority of our time at work, so it's important that we consider everything. Today, what we're going to cover. First, I want to level set on some of the definitions and also the key differences between the public and private sector. I'll also talk about some common challenges when it comes to transitioning, but the bulk of this presentation will be on a framework to translate your experience. I do leave time at the end of my live presentations for Q&A, and I certainly want to share with you some next steps that you can start today to start feeling more confident and prepared for your transition. So first, let's talk about some of the definitions. The public sector, you're familiar with this. This is the part of the economy that's controlled by the government, providing services like education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This is government. Public service is the work that you do within that sector. So it's the work that's done to benefit the public, often within government agencies that serve the community. So now let's talk about the private sector. A for-profit company is a business that's focused on generating profit for its owners or shareholders through goods and services. Now, why do I say owners or shareholders? This is where some people get confused. There is such thing as a public company. That would be a for-profit business whose shares are traded on the stock exchange. So any of the large corporations, I'm sure you know, Google, Apple, Uber, Pepsi, any company where you can buy stocks, that would be considered a public company because there is public investment. Every public company is a for-profit company, but not every for-profit company is public. For instance, I have my own business that generates profit and I'm the owner, but you cannot buy shares in my company. A nonprofit organization you may be familiar with, an organization focused on a mission to serve public good. Now, one of the biggest differences between a for-profit organization and a nonprofit organization is what they do with that profit. So we think about profit in terms of your revenue minus your expenses. So whatever is left over, you get to keep. However, in a nonprofit, they reinvest that money into the mission that they have. So instead of the owners or shareholders walking away with the profit from that year, they end up reinvesting that money into their mission. Now, similarly, non-governmental organizations or NGOs are independent, nonprofit groups that address social, environmental, or humanitarian issues that are often operating internationally. So we typically think of the government being the international liaison to other countries. However, NGOs are not part of the government, but they do work internationally. They are similar to nonprofits, but nonprofits are typically domestic focused. So when we compare the public and private sector, what are a few things we notice? In the public sector, very mission driven. It is all around a mission. What can we accomplish? How do we want to help people, citizens, and the betterment of those around us? The government is also known for being very structured, a lot of bureaucracy or red tape. That is how the government functions. And in some ways, there is a good reason for that, but it's certainly structured, and we know that to be true. I hate that I have to have an asterisk here, but historically, the public sector is known to be very stable. Unfortunately, what we see right now is not reflecting that stability, but that typically is a hallmark of the government. In the private sector, it's very profit driven. That is the goal at the end of the day. They want profit. Because of that, it's very fast paced. They need to be nimble and flexible, adjusting with the market, understanding their customers. But in addition to that, year over year, companies always want to make sure they're increasing revenue and also decreasing their expense. And what does that do? It optimizes profit. Some of the common challenges in transitioning, because you are not the first to do it, I can promise you. People have successfully made this transition, so we know some of those common challenges. So the first would be translating skills to private sector language. This is very key because both the public and private sector have their fair share of acronyms and terms. However, they are not usually the same. So if you apply to jobs or you speak with recruiters or you have a resume that has all of the public sector terminology, likely most people won't even know what you're talking about. Therefore, that is so crucial in this process. Additionally, adapting to a faster paced environment can be difficult. Like I said, there's so much bureaucracy in the government, and because of that, it does work at a slower pace. Whereas for-profit companies are not even just going at a normal pace, they are accelerated, trying to find that growth constantly. Additionally, and we'll talk about networking later in the presentation, 85% of jobs are gotten through some form of networking. So building a private sector network is essential. And then lastly, reframing and reformatting your resume is a very common challenge and probably one of the biggest challenges that most people struggle with. We will spend time on that in this presentation. However, if you want to learn more about resumes, definitely check out my Level Up Your Resume webinar. I do that live, and there is also a video posted on YouTube. So the transition framework, which will be the bulk of our presentation today, we'll talk through identifying some transferable skills, reframing your experience, tailoring your resume, tapping into your network, and lastly, I want to touch on embracing a growth mindset. All of these things are very important. So first, let's talk about identifying transferable skills. I'll give you a process and what this should look like, and then we'll talk about how to think about transferable skills. So the first thing you can do is break down your current role. List out your key responsibilities and identify the skills used. Those are two separate things. Writing out your responsibilities does not always highlight the skill. So you do need to think critically of what do I do that allows me to do that responsibility successfully. From there, think about highlighting achievements. So showcase 3 to 5 career achievements and the skills that are behind them. So understanding not just what have you done that would be considered impressive or have value to the private sector, but then that level deeper to understand and what was the skill that allowed me to achieve that. From here, you do have to do research. That certainly is a part of this process, especially if you do not have any background or understanding or knowledge surrounding the private sector. I want to remind you, if you've never worked in the private sector, why would you? A lot of people struggle with this and they feel as though they're not meeting expectations or something is wrong. But please know, there's no expectation for you to understand the private sector if you haven't worked in it. So you do have to do the research the roles and the industries that exist out there and try to align them with your skills. Also, thinking about ATS-friendly keywords, which you can find in the job description, and later we will talk more about ATS. I want you to also think about leveraging your soft or hidden skills. So highlight interpersonal skills. Working on cross-functional teams and understanding those around you is so important in the private sector. So do not underestimate things like conflict resolution, the ability to translate technical things to non-technical people. Those are all skills that are important. Now, from this, you would then go off to network, tailor your resume, and take action. So conducting informational interviews with people who work in the roles or industries you've identified, updating your resume with private sector keywords, and then applying strategically. In this example, I want to show you a few things, how to reframe your experience in a few different ways. So first, I want to share with you something that might be common in the public sector, something you may be used to hearing and would make sense. From there, I want to demonstrate, one, the value to extract out of that, the value that the private sector will see in that experience, and also demonstrate how one thing in the public sector could actually show value in multiple ways in the private sector. And so this is what I want you to think through as you go to reframe your experience. So in the public sector, you might hear something like managed a team of 15 employees to oversee the implementation of federal compliance programs, ensuring adherence to regulatory standards and reporting requirements. Fine, that's great. That gives me information in the public sector. I understand what you've done, and of course, I see the value. But let's talk about reframing that for the private sector. Led a cross-functional team of 15 to successfully implement compliance programs, improving operational efficiency, and reducing risk exposure by 25%. Wow, very different. Let's look at that and break it down. So first, let's call out the idea of cross-functional experience. Using this term is very much so aligned with the private sector, and it also shows or demonstrates what you've been able to do. So working cross-functionally, I'll give the example. I used to work in finance. I worked on a task force that included myself as part of finance, marketing team, product development, R&D, product supply, manufacturing, and everyone who touched the process of making the product that we made. That was cross-functional. I needed to understand not just my value as finance, but how R&D made a difference to product supply and how that impacted marketing and how that impacted operations. I needed to understand how every function came into play. So being able to work cross-functionally is essential. It also demonstrates being successful towards a shared goal. When you work cross-functionally, marketing may want to have a huge marketing budget because they have such great ideas. R&D wants to optimize getting the best ingredients to make sure they're putting forth the best product. Myself as finance, my priority in a lot of cases was saving money. However, while we all have different goals within this, at the end of the day, our goal was to create a great product that met the market's needs. And so despite whatever differences we may have, we were able to work together towards a shared goal. So let's break this down even further because there are multiple ways that we can see this and extract value for the private sector. Developed and executed compliance strategies to meet regulatory standards, resulting in a 100% audit success rate and streamlined reporting processes. What do we take away from this? Strategy development and execution, and both of those are very important. You're demonstrating that you not only have the ability to create a strategy, which does require many skills, an analytical skill, the critical thinking that goes into it, understanding the impact to the larger business, and then being able to execute. Some people are idea people, but you need to be able to follow through. And so the ability to say not just creating that strategy, but then executing against it has so much value. Now, one thing I want to call out in all of these is the value of quantification. I'm sure you've heard that a lot if you have already been researching, transitioning from the public to private sector, but quantification is one of your biggest tools in order to very quickly convey value to a recruiter. So let's look at the private sector first example. Improving operational efficiency and reducing risk exposure by 25%. Here, you're showing the impact of the work that you've done. What is the impact to the business? When recruiters read resumes, they're thinking, what have you done for someone else that you can also do for me? So when you improve that operational efficiency and reduce that risk exposure, being able to say that you did it by 25% really perks up some ears. Now, if we look at the second example, a 100% audit success rate and streamlined reporting processes. Well, having a 100% audit success rate is fantastic. Everybody wants that, of course. That's not a bad thing. And then streamlining reporting processes, fantastic. I'm saving time, which typically means I'm saving money. If we compare that to ensuring adherence to regulatory standards and reporting requirements, that's great. That is necessary. That is something you have to accomplish and be very aware of in the public sector. But in the private sector, that doesn't really tell me the value that you bring. Now, some people talk about the fact that they don't have jobs that are easily quantifiable. So instead of thinking about being able to reduce risk exposure by 25% or a 100% audit success rate, if you don't have a very quantifiable job, try to think about sizing. So maybe you oversaw a team of 5, but that's very different than overseeing a team of 20. Or if you do event planning, putting together an event for 50 people is very different than 200 people. So anywhere that you can interject some numbers to give someone an idea of what you've done, the size of it, the value of it numerically is very helpful in the private sector. Tailoring your resume is so essential. Again, if you have questions on the resume, I highly recommend you check out my Level Up Your Resume webinar. I do that live, or you can find it here on YouTube. But for tailoring your resume, you want to focus on results and metrics. Like I just said, there is so much value in being able to size out or give detail to what you've been able to accomplish. So being results driven and giving quantifiable metrics is your best bet. Also, using private sector language, we talked about how you simply need someone to understand it. So the private sector folks are maybe not going to understand your public sector language. You need to make sure that it makes sense. You also need to keep your resume very concise and impactful. My rule of thumb, if you have 6 or more years of work experience, 2-page resume is fine. If you have 5 or fewer, really try to hold it to that 1 page, especially if you were early in your career, 1 to 3 years of work experience, there is no reason you should have a 2-page resume. So keep it concise and make sure you're focusing on those outcomes. And then also staying ATS compliant. The applicant tracking system filters through resumes when you apply. It accepts and rejects them. Making sure you're compliant is what is going to ensure that you make it through to a human reader. Tap into your network. I mentioned how important this is before, but 85% of jobs are gotten through some form of networking. So make sure you're doing things like leveraging LinkedIn and your alumni networks. Alumni networks are overlooked way too often. Most colleges give lifetime access to graduates to their career services. So make sure you check in and see what is available to you that you may not even know. Additionally, people are so much more likely to have a quick conversation with you if you have something in common. So reaching out to your alumni network can really go a long way. Additionally, do things like attend industry events, whether that's in person or virtual. Now, that is a short and long-term career investment. In the short term, most of us are hoping that networking pays off immediately. You speak with someone, they say, great, I know of a job that you'd be great for. I'm happy to be your reference. However, that's not always the case. You may have to speak with a lot of people first before you're able to find the right role. Don't get discouraged because every conversation you have is an investment long-term in your career. If you go to these events, if you have these conversations, people will start to know who you are and they will start to think of you. So instead of you having to initiate every call, you'll start to see that people start to reach out to you because you've developed those relationships. Reach out to connections for informational interviews. People severely underestimate the value of an informational interview. I always say this gives you the cheat codes. You can ask them, what is it that you do in your role? What are the top 3 skills you're constantly using? If you were hiring someone for your role, what would you be looking out for? Ask questions that are going to benefit you through the recruiting process and in the interview. Think about personal branding and how you can convey who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table. Once you're confident in that, that will shine through. I mentioned embracing a growth mindset and how important that can be. I want you to view this transition as an opportunity. While a lot of people did not choose to be in this situation, thinking about it as an opportunity and making that perspective shift will make so much more of a difference than you realize. Some folks have said, I've been doing this and I've been doing it for maybe 10, 15 years, but I've always wanted to try something different, but I've never made the move. So maybe this is an opportunity for you to try something that you've been thinking about. While it may not be ideal, while it may not be something that you decided you wanted for yourself, try to see this as an opportunity to do something for yourself. I encourage you to stay open to learning and new experiences, especially for those folks who have had many years of work experience in the public sector. Remember, if you have not worked in the private sector, there is no real reason you would have a lot of information or knowledge. So you will have to be a student, going back to being open to learning, having those new experiences, learning from people at all levels of all ages. It is important that you keep yourself open to this because that will make a very big difference, especially when people think about hiring you onto their team. And lastly, if you do not believe that you can be successful, you won't be, because that is your belief. But if you believe in your ability to succeed, that is the jumping off point that's going to allow you to see this as an opportunity, to use this as a learning opportunity, and to have these new experiences. So understanding that, yes, it may be difficult, but you can do it. It is possible. Right now, it is not business as usual. So seek support. Transitioning to a new career path can feel incredibly overwhelming, especially when you did not opt for this yourself. Many professionals, they find it helpful to work with someone who can provide the guidance and clarity, also actionable strategies. And that is exactly what I provide as a coach. So whether it is refining your resume, thinking about preparing for interviews, or just overall navigating the job market, do not be afraid to reach out to people, whether it be someone like myself for coaching or other people, free resources that you can find. Make sure that you are reaching out and seeking that support. I want to provide you with the next step that you can start today. First, take time to process. This is a major unexpected change, and many folks are likely still in shock. So take the time to process through it. It is going to be so helpful for you to lay that foundation, having processed through it, and then being able to start this journey. In that journey, be strategic and thoughtful. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you're just trying to rush to the next thing, and having that spray and pray mentality is not going to work. Create a strategic plan and methodical steps for how you're going to assess companies, assess roles, tailor your resume, and more. So being methodical and strategic will go a long way in making sure that you're actually being seen by recruiters and ranking high with ATS so that you're being chosen for interviews. Lastly, the biggest piece of advice, something you can start today, create a network matrix. So this is not meant to be you starting to reach out to people immediately. This is for you to literally put on paper, who do I know? When I am ready to start reaching out to people, who can I reach out to? So think about, have you ever worked with vendors? Maybe that's a great place to start. You can reach out to someone and say, hey, I remember working together on this project. I'm looking for roles in the private sector. I'd love to speak with you. So maybe on your network matrix, that's someone who you immediately put on there. And then from there, maybe they know other people in that industry. Maybe they work in the job function that you're interested in. But really just think about, who do I know? Who do they know? Where could they connect me? Are they part of associations or different organizations that I could start to be a part of? And when you do reach out to people, make sure you're actually giving them information. You're not just making it known that you're looking for a job, but you're also making it known who you are and the value that you want to bring to a company. I'd love for you to connect with me. Definitely make sure you check out my other videos here on YouTube, subscribe to my channel so you do not miss out. I currently am offering 30% off of your purchase to any federal employee who's been impacted by the recent events. So please go to my website to see that. If you want to schedule a complimentary consultation, use the QR code, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Feel free to reach out to me via email, and thank you for watching From Public Service to Private Sector, a roadmap to career transition.